I'm Lynn Cohick, Chair of Biblical and Theological Studies here at Wheaton College, and I'm joined by A.J. Levine, who is University Professor of New Testament and Jewish Studies, which is the highest honor that a professor can hold. She is also the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Professor of New Testament Studies and Jewish Studies. You're Professor of Jewish Studies there at both the Divinity School and the College of Arts and Sciences at Vanderbilt. What a mouthful. And I'm holding just part of your CV, which extends, well, the copy I had was 65 pages. You said it's a little bit longer now.
Right, because the one you have is about 10 months outdated. So,
so we know you write in your sleep. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what it's like being a woman in the academy. And as I was looking at one of your books that all of your work I find so fascinating, but one called The Misunderstood Jew, in the beginning you talk about your childhood and some of the dreams that you had, including that you thought maybe you'd like to grow up and be the Pope.
I did indeed. So when Pope John the 23rd died, this is in the early 1960s, I came home from school, and the only thing that was on television, back when television only had 3 stations, was the funeral of Pope John the 23rd. And my mother said to me, you need to watch this. Pope John the 23rd was a good man. He was particularly good for the Jews because when he was papal nuncio during World War II, he helped Jews escape the Nazis. So he's a hero. He's an important man. He was the one who convened Vatican II. And the end result of Vatican II, among other things, was a document that was produced after he died that said that Jews in all times and all places cannot be held responsible for the death of Jesus. And that creates a sea change in Catholic religious education. Anyway, he's important. So I'm watching this. So what do I know about the Pope? Which at that time, precious little. You live in Italy. That meant spaghetti and pizza. Nothing wrong there.
Exactly.
Right. You get to wear white. I look good in white, so I thought that would work. You get a big hat, good jewelry. You know, the accessories
What's not
alone.
to love?
Right. The accessories alone are helpful. You get to stand up in a car and go like this, and everybody loves you, and it's good for the Jews. So I said to my mother, when I grow up, I want to be Pope, because it's good for the Jews and you get good accessories and pizza. And my mother said, you can't be Pope. And I said, why not? And she said, because you're not Italian. So,
I love your mom. That's a great answer.
And it's probably the only one that would have satisfied me.
Yeah. What else how did she raise you that you are where you are today?
When I would come home from school, my mother, the first thing she would say to me every day was, did you ask any good questions today? Because she was curious about what I was curious about. Where was the academic interest? What confused me? What did I want to know more about? My mom, who herself had graduated from college in 1933 and was told by her parents, no, you cannot go on and do graduate work because you have 2 brothers and we need to get them through medical school and it's the height of the Depression and you need to come home and work. Her view was, whatever child she had, and she was 44 when I was born, and I am an only child. Her view was, anything this little girl wants, as long as it makes some sort of sense, she is going to open the door and make sure this happened. So when I started to ask questions about religion, as I did when I was very, very young, she was more than happy to accommodate this. Yes, I'll make sure that the priest will let you into Mass and not expect you to take communion. And yes, you can go to religious education class with your friends, but we'll make sure that you don't have to do certain things that would be counter to your Jewish identity. Yes, you can get this book, or yes, you can go to this museum.
So why then New Testament? I mean, you're a New Testament scholar of the highest, held in highest esteem.
Yeah. Well, first of all, because it's interesting.
Okay, I agree with you there.
And it strikes me as just so bizarre when Christians say, why would you study the New Testament? Well, because it's interesting. I'm interested in several things about it. I'm interested in how particular interpretations of it have led to anti-Jewish thoughts and sometimes action. Right? So how does the gospel wind up being deformed into a text of hate? And what can prevent that from happening? But I also recognize that the New Testament is substantially Jewish history. So that even growing up, we were very good in synagogue education up to the time of the Maccabees in the 2nd century BCE. And then suddenly, like magic, we're into the Mishnah, which is about the year 200, 220, Common Era. So if I want to know about 1st century Judaism, the New Testament's one of my best sources. if I want to know about women in Galilee, the New Testament is my best source.
Right. And in fact, I want to plug this also, which is coming out in a second edition.
Second edition.
The Jewish Annotated New Testament.
Yep.
Which, so I have to tell a little story about this. A couple of months ago, over the summer, my father, when I was visiting, they live in Pennsylvania, when I was visiting him, he said to me, by the way, I'm watching this Great Courses study on the Old Testament, and the teacher is, what's her name? A.J. Levine. Yeah, and do you know her? I said, yeah, I do. He said, wow, she's my hero.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yes, so I said, all right, Dad, and I got him this book, which is the New Testament, but it has a lot of extra essays and information, and you have a second edition that's coming out that's even bigger. Tell us a little bit about that.
More essays, but larger print. That was the first thing. I'm getting old, and my eyes are, I can't read the tiny print. Right? What we did is all the contributors, and at this point we have, for the first edition we had 51, I think we now have 70 something, all Jewish, and across the Jewish spectrum, from quite Orthodox to people who would identify as secular Jews. So we annotated, it's Oxford University Press, standard annotated Bible. But what we did is foreground Jewish background. So does this text have a resonance from the Dead Sea Scrolls, or Philo, or Josephus, or any non-canonical Jewish book? What does rabbinic tradition say about these same questions? So what does rabbinic tradition, for example, say about love of God and love of neighbor? Where we know that sermons sometimes go wrong, or anti-Jewish thoughts can pop out, we pulled out little gray boxes, sort of guidelines for priests and pastors and Bible study leaders saying, don't go here, go here, like warning signs. And the back essays range from how did the temple function, how was the law understood, what was Jewish family life like, to more broad questions like how have Jews understood Jesus over the centuries? How have they understood Paul over the centuries? How have Jews used Jesus as a figure in art or a figure in literature? What's the current state of Jewish-Christian relations? So what we try to do is produce a book for Jews to read so the New Testament becomes more familiar to them, and produce a book for Christians to read so that they can more fully understand the Jewish context in which the New Testament takes shape, and be better prepared to engage in Jewish-Christian dialogue by seeing how Jews have looked at some of those New Testament passages and New Testament figures over time.
Yeah, I appreciate so much your scholarship in doing that, and in the other areas that 65 pages and counting that you've worked on. I'd like to hear a little bit about what your own story has been like in terms of getting your PhD, now mentoring PhD students. And I want to start with a story that you told me about your name, Amy Jill, and I've identified you as AJ.
Yeah.
But Amy Jill didn't get as much published as AJ did. Talk to me a little about that.
Right. So when I'm in graduate school, I found that I was not getting the same mail as my male colleagues were getting. I was not getting the same invitations that they were getting. And I thought to myself, I think I'm as smart as they are, and I thought I was doing pretty well. And I was getting good comments from faculty. And so one of the faculty members just took me aside one day, because I was lamenting about this, and he said, go by AJ and see what happens. And the gates opened up.
Is that right?
So ranging from early on, when I wasn't quite as well known, people would do reviews saying, displaying remarkable feminist sensitivity. He argues that. I've gone to conferences where I've been invited to give the plenary, and I get up and people look at me and say, I thought you were somebody's wife. As opposed to, oh, this is A.J. Levine. Sometimes, once was lovely at a Catholic institution where they didn't realize that they thought I was a priest. So it's like, let's have shared housing. And I said, I really want my own bathroom here. Yeah, thank you very much. And I wound up in the bishop's suite, which was great.
Nice, yeah.
So sometimes it works. There's always the problem of, so you get pigeonholed. Like, I'm the Jewish New Testament scholar, as opposed to the New Testament scholar who happens to be Jewish. Right. Or I'm the woman biblical scholar as opposed to the biblical scholar who happens to be a woman. And as soon as those labels come in, again, there's a set of stereotypes and a set of expectations, which can sometimes get a foot in the door, but other times become a block.
Right. How do you how do you counsel then grad students, both men and women, who are, how can male graduate students help their female peers, and how can female graduate students get ahead, follow their dreams?
Way back when, being a woman graduate student was somewhat like the whole Ginger Rogers Fred Astaire thing. You have to be as good as the man, but you have to do it backwards and in heels. So things are a little bit better now, but I still find a number of women write to me and say, I'm really interested in writing on gender studies or sexuality studies or images of women. And my male faculty members say, no, that's just faddish, it's unimportant, go write on something more important. To which my response is, women really are half of the world. I think that's important.
That's important, yeah.
So how best to get through? One way is networking. If you are the only woman in your graduate program and you're feeling that this is a problem, and not all women do, to find mentors outside, to find networks with whom you can work. The Society of Biblical Literature has a women's network that does very, very well, and a women's committee that will help you if you get into some of this gender-based difficulty. You need to be as good as, but also to avoid this sometimes, well, we're not going to hold you to such a high standard because you're a woman. You poor thing, your brain is not quite adequate to the task. So to make sure that you're being treated fairly, and if you're not, to speak to a woman faculty member or somebody who would be sympathetic to your cause to help you get where you need to go.
Right, right. And for their male peers, what can we say to them?
It depends upon the male peer. I was very fortunate when I was in graduate school because the men with whom I was in graduate school treated me with friendship and respect, and they still remain very, very good friends after all these years, which is lovely. But if you're the only woman and the men look at you and say, of course you will make the coffee, or they look at you and they say, what did the women think about? Just to remind them that you are not here to be their complementarian partner, but you are here as a person in a graduate program with the same academic needs and concerns as they have. For me, I'm a domestic disaster. I'm just terrible in the kitchen. So was my mother. So was her mother. So I said,
that's why we have takeout.
That's why we have takeout, and that's why now I'm so pleased we have Keurig machines.
Exactly.
I can work those. To say no, I'm sorry. That's not the role I'm here for. My role is not to be your mom, and my role is not to be your servant. My role is to be a fellow student, to walk side by side you, rather than underneath you.
Why does the Academy need more women scholars?
Well, some of the women scholars that we have don't do us much good, right? So it's not like all women are going to be the same anyway.
Fair
I don't want to
point.
get into that
Absolutely.
stereotype. So we have some
Exactly.
women scholars who can be like the queen bee. I've made it, and I'm going to push everybody else down because, I'm now the CEO. But we need diversity in the classroom in a variety of ways because people, given their own experiences, will sometimes hear something differently and then can say, hold on here. And again, not all women will think the same way, and not all evangelicals will think the same way, or Asian Americans or African Americans or people who would classify as disabled. I mean, we all have different views. But, for example, we're reading, the story of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law, and then she rises from her sickbed and gets up to serve. And some of my women students will say, why didn't he serve her? I mean, she's been sick. Give her a break. And others will say, well, gee, the service word is diaconate language, and is this a form of ministry? And is she representing what happens in a house church? Or is she the only woman in the house? And, where's Peter's wife? And are there any daughters running around? And I find that women more often than men will ask those questions. And the men will go, oh, Jesus healed somebody.
Right.
Or more Christologically thinking, I find with my women students, and particularly the master's candidates, the ones who are interested in pastoral ministry, church ministry, or religious education, they can identify with Jesus in his suffering, and they can identify with Jesus in his being rejected by people in his hometown or by his disciples, or being deserted. They have a hard time identifying with Jesus in his teaching role.
Interesting.
But the men don't. So how then do we work wait a minute, you have gifts,
Yeah.
you've been called, you can do this,
Mhm.
and giving them the confidence that they can do that.
And helping their male peers to understand that Jesus also is the one who suffered and is the one who felt alone.
Right.
Those aspects of Jesus's life that they may kind of skip over.
Yep.
And not fully appreciate.
Yeah. Or noting, at least in Mark, when the disciples all hightail it and get out of there, it's the women who are there at the cross and the tomb.
Oh, it makes me so mad every time Jesus died alone. I'm thinking, hello. Excuse me.
Well, I mean, and if I could have a chat with Mark, I mean, I really want to have a chat with Paul. But if I could have a chat with
And
Mark,
I'd like to be there if you don't mind when
wouldn't
you start
that be
talking
fun,
to him.
right? I would say to Mark, chapter 15 at the cross, and you're only 16 chapters long. At the cross, you tell me women have been there the entire time they had been following him from the Galilee? Now I have to go back and reread the gospel and put the women in there. You could have told me the first time.
Well, he wanted you to read the whole way through.
You think?
I don't know, just to find out.
Yeah.
No. Well, it's been very delightful to visit with you about women in the academy, talking about that and about your own career. And I'm very thankful that you were able to come and chat with us today. I'm Lynn Kohig, Chair of Biblical and Theological Studies, talking with A.J. Levine about women in the academy. Thank you so much.
Most welcome.